Let's start the show. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience, and I've continuously competed for fantasy championships during the course of the past 6 seasons. But enough of me, I'm here for you. On today's episode of the FV Show, we're going to be continuing our All-32 NFL team preview through the lens of fantasy football, and today we're going to be taking a look at the New Orleans Saints, one of the most high-powered offenses in the NFL. But before we get started with that video, I need 2 quick things from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style, so you never miss a video, and also hit that like button like an open receiver down the field. Now without further ado, let's get started breaking down the New Orleans Saints. So we're going to come over once again. The way that this series works is I have these wonderful graphic player biographies made. We're just going to roll through them. If you missed the first episode of this series, we did cover the Atlanta Falcons, so link to that will be somewhere up here. I think it's this side. So let's just go right into it, shall we? We're going to start off with the New Orleans Saints, and of course, you got to start with Drew Brees when you're talking about the Saints, right? So Drew Brees had a very good fantasy season last year, despite missing a few games due to that thumb injury that he suffered earlier in this year. So that's obviously going to affect where he finishes overall. Last season, because of those missed games, he was quarterback 22. But this is where you have to look at the adjusted score. The adjusted score is to pretty much remove the injuries, missed games, suspensions, things like that, and create a more accurate representation of what the player actually finished as. I'm going to do a whole video of this, talking about this today actually. That's going to be dropping in just a few hours, so be sure to hit that subscribe button before you end off this video. But this is what I'm talking about, right? Drew Brees, it looks like that he had a poor year because he finished at quarterback 22. But then you start to look at the weekly finishes, and this is where the real picture is actually painted. In his 11 games played, 8 of those games he finished as a quarterback 1. 1 game was a quarterback 2. 1 game was a quarterback 3. And I'm going to have it pulled up right here. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, what week was that? Was the Rams week 2 or week 1? It was week 2. Because the Rams played the Panthers week 1. I am a Panthers fan, and that's how I remember these things. So basically, when Drew Brees was healthy and when he was playing, he was unbelievable. And that's the way that Drew Brees has always been, right? Just this unbelievable low-key stat pattern that he's just going to run up the stats every single time he's out on the football field. And let's be honest, he's got one of the best weapons, probably 2 of the best weapons to do it with in the NFL today. So just kind of recapping last season now a little bit further, he had 281 completions, 738 pass attempts. Passing yards were just shy of 3,000 despite missing 4.5 games essentially. 28 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. There's nothing to be said. We got classic Drew Brees all of last season, and once again, having the weapons that he does certainly helps that. But now let's just talk about where he's going right now. ADP is currently quarterback 11 in the later half of the 8th round. I do want to make note of this. I said during the Atlanta Falcons video that on my graphic I had Matt Ryan in the 6th round, but when I pulled up the ADP, it had him towards like the 7th or 8th. I don't know what happened because I looked back at the ADP today to finalize the Drew Brees graphic, and it was correct. The 609 was correct for Matt Ryan. So I don't know if it was just the page loaded weirdly and the ADP loaded a bit funky during yesterday's video, but regardless, this is accurate, so we are good to go on that end. However, his ADP is QB 11. But I have Drew Brees ranked at QB 8. And now, obviously, the big thing here is maybe the emergence of young quarterbacks kind of taking over the majority of QB1s. But Drew Brees, like we saw it last year, you're looking at the numbers right now. Drew Brees was still utterly incredible for your fantasy team despite him being an older quarterback. I don't know if this is the year that Drew Brees falls off either because the weapons haven't changed. And Drew Brees, if you want to go along the lines of Michael Thomas, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, right? Drew Brees just carves guys up through the middle on short slants. And that's not a knock to Michael Thomas or Drew Brees, but it's just how the Saints have ran their offense during the course of the past 3 seasons or so. It's been quick hits, and let's just have our wide receivers make plays and extend plays. The wide receivers predominantly being Michael Thomas. And so, because of this is their offensive style, I don't see how Drew Brees can necessarily regress to the levels that some people are expecting him to, because that play style suits an aging quarterback so well. And then you also have the opportunity for dump offs to Alvin Kamara. They brought in Emmanuel Sanders. Like, they still have Jared Cook, who we're going to talk about. Like, these are all fantasy relevant players, and you're giving these guys to a quarterback who can still make plays, who could still throw the ball. And even if he can't, the offense is designed for success in that way. So I'm pretty much all in on Drew Brees this year. And just to reiterate the point of how great he was, once Drew Brees came back from injury, and I do have this, I smartly pulled this up beforehand, just so I can make reference of it, because I do think it's important to recognize when guys kind of have like their stretch of runs, right? So from week 11 onwards, Drew Brees had 6 games as a quarterback 1 game as a quarterback 3. So in that, that's a 7-week span, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, in the 7-week span, 6 games as a quarterback 1 game as a quarterback 3. He was incredible once he got fully healthy and once the Saints started playing down the stretch. And I kind of expect the same thing to happen again. I don't see the reason why this is the year that Drew Brees falls off, that some people are saying, or some people are projecting rather. Is there anything else as far as Drew Brees goes? I think that's it. This is pretty self-explanatory. Once again, he averaged 21 points per game essentially, and that's great from the quarterback position. So now let's take a look at the Saints running back, and that is going to be Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara, however, tomato, I think I flip-flop. Now that I say it out, I don't know how many times I've actually said, I say Kamara. I definitely say Kamara. That was weird. Huh. Who knows? Anyways, Alvin Kamara is kind of an enigma for fantasy because he could be so good. Like, we're just going to call him AK now because now I'm getting in my head about how to say his last name. If AK got if he got 80% of the workload, he would be the best running back in football. I firmly believe Alvin Kamara is the most talented running back in football. And so the fact that he's been doing this, like you look at his touches right now, 171 carries, like that's pocket change. 81 reception, that's where he's gonna get a majority of work there as well. But that's not a whole lot of touches for one of the best running backs in football. I kind of feel like Kamara and Aaron Jones are kind of in that same boat where what would happen if they got the majority of their team's workload. And it makes me really sad because Alvin Kamara could have at least one season being the running back 1. And just because of the Saints offense, it really limits him in that way. But despite that, he's still a top 5 running back for fantasy. So let's talk about 2019. 2019 was interesting for Alvin Kamara. And the reason why it was interesting because it felt like on the surface that he wasn't giving you the boom games that you wanted. And there were a lot of games where he just honestly kind of fell flat and he just killed you. And you can't have games like that coming from your first round pick, especially someone that you probably drafted in the top 4 last year. So let's pull this up right now. I'm looking at Kamara, and he had 2 games of an RB1 finish in the first 3 weeks, so that was good. But really, it was the middle of the year when things really dipped off for him. I mean, he went multiple weeks without having a running back 1 finish. From week 3 to week 11, he had, those were bookends. He had running back 1 performances then, but that whole middle stretch, and there were 2 games missed with it. There were 2 games missed with an injury there where Latavius Murray took over. But it was really just a bizarre season for Alvin Kamara because his expectations were so high, because Mark Ingram left and you had this opportunity where we were excited to see how much more of a workload he was going to get. But despite that, he finished in standard leagues as a running back 12, or I'm sorry, running back 16. PPR was running back 12, but that's not good from your first round pick. You drafted this guy in the top 4, and that's where he finished. As far as points per game and adjusted finish, that does help his case a little bit more, just to kind of paint the full picture as what he actually was. And that was a tenth of a point shy of 15 points per game, 14 games played, and when you do the math and you stat that out, his new finish is a running back 9 on the year. And once again, just going through the stats, like, it's unbelievable how much he is used in the passing game. And you can make the argument that does make up for his lack of touches and carries, specifically if you are playing in a PPR format. Because with 81 receptions, you're getting 40 points there just off of catches alone. And once again, this offense is designed for either outs from the running back, or if you want to do quick slants for wide receivers. So it's designed for a guy like Kamara to succeed. And then 6 touchdowns, that's honestly the bummer. Like, that's such an average to underwhelming number for a guy that you did draft so high in the first round last year. But despite all of that, nothing's changed. Alvin Kamara is an absolute monster of a player. We've seen it year over year, and we know what he could be, and honestly what he ultimately is. And that is, he could be a fantasy superstar every single week. You're looking at the ADP right now, and I am on consensus with that. Running back 4 across the board, both in my rankings and in the ADP. And I'm not sure how many guys you would actually be willing to take ahead of him. So I'm going to pull up my rankings just to kind of give you an idea. Let's see. So I have my rankings up here now. And we're looking at guys who you could take instead of Alvin Kamara at the 4 slot. If you wanted to go wide receiver, you could go Michael Thomas if you really wanted to in a PPR league. But there's Dalvin Cook, Kenyon Drake, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry. As much talent as those players have, there is a clear teardrop to me. Alvin Kamara so firmly belongs in that top tier of running backs with CMC, Barkley, Elliott, and then AK, that I don't know the world where I would take Dalvin Cook over Kamara, or Kenyon Drake over Kamara. Or, it doesn't make sense. I don't know the world where that happens, so I would not do that. And honestly, I have Kamara at 4. And I'm looking at some of this now, in a vacuum, Barkley or Kamara. In a vacuum, Zeke or Kamara. Can I adjust my rankings on the fly here? Because as great as Barkley is, the Giants' schedule is insane. And that's something that we have to, hang on, before we even get into that, that's something we have to talk about with the Saints. The Saints are in a division with the Falcons, the Bucks, and the Panthers. Well, let's talk about the Panthers, because the Panthers' defense is absolute utter garbage this year. And then the other 2 teams in the division have high-powered offenses. So it looks like pretty much every single game you're going to get a shootout of some sort within the division. So there's 6 games right there where you're looking at the division, where you're looking at shootouts. And I don't know off the top of my head what the Saints' schedule actually is this year. I probably should have had that pulled up beforehand, so I apologize for that. But back to what I was saying, maybe it's possible that I have Kamara in my top 3 and not 4. Because the Giants' schedule is absolutely brutal all season, essentially. So what's the world where you draft Kamara over Barkley? I don't know if I'd be opposed to that. Now, once you start getting into that Zeke conversation, I think the Cowboys are going to run the table this year, because I just kind of did my stats for them earlier today. But yeah, Kamara, if you take Kamara in the top 4, top 3, top 2, maybe, because you're not taking Kamara over CMC, I don't think. So if you anywhere in that 2 through 4 range, I'm totally cool with. But now let's talk about maybe one of the most important handcuffs in fantasy football, and that's his backfield mate, Latavius Murray. So the thing you have to realize with handcuffs, and I talked about this with Hayden Hurst yesterday, their 2019 finishes are really never going to be pretty. And you kind of have to look at their adjusted scores, but even then that's so altered as well. The adjusted score doesn't really do kindly to guys who are backups in that way because it doesn't really matter. So what you're really looking for Latavius Murray is a guy who can steal goal line work, vulture touchdowns. We love fantasy vultures around here, right? And then also just on the chance that Kamara goes down with an injury, you have the backup running back to a guy in a high-powered offense. When Kamara went down last year, there were 2 games. Latavius Murray finished as an RB1 in both of those games. He was, if my stats are correct, it was week 7 he finished as running back 2, and week 3 he finished, week 7, week 7 he was running back 2, and week 8 he was running back 3. So whoever is in the backfield for the Saints is going to be a fantasy monster. And even just looking at his stats from last year too, right? Like 146 touches. That's 30 less than what Kamara had. And receptions, obviously that is where Kamara shines. But still, 35 receptions is still like that's fine. Especially for a guy who's splitting time in a backfield like that. His rushing yards just over 600, receiving 230, and he had the same amount of touchdowns as Kamara did. Now, will that happen again this year? Probably not, because I do think Kamara kind of returns to form to what we saw 2 years ago. But still, just having the opportunity to have a player like this on your team, like, there is value to that. However, my personal opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of handcuffs, because to me, handcuffs just waste a roster spot that you could be using on a guy that you know you're going to be starting week in and week out. That said, the slight difference between Murray and some other guys is that you know that the Saints use a running back by committee, and so Latavius Murray does have some flex end value every single week, especially if you just need to plug in a guy during bye weeks. And oddly enough, once again, my ranking and the ADP is perfect. We are in sync on this. Running back 44 across the board, and he's currently going in the 10th round of 12-team leagues. To me, I think that's fine. Let me just pull up ADP. Let's see. Position, running back. So here's some guys that are going... Hang on, there we go. So here's some guys that are going behind Latavius Murray. You have Tony Pollard, Tariq Cohen, J.K. Dobbins, Rashad Penny, Duke Johnson, Chase Edmonds. In a PPR league, I'm probably taking Cohen over Murray. And Dobbins, who knows what that Ravens backfield's going to be, but that's also an intriguing one. But still, everybody else, like that, like where he's at kind of makes sense. And then going ahead of Murray is Keyshawn Vaughn, Jordan Howard, Matt Breida, Phillip Lindsay, DeAndre Swift. So that range kind of feels right. That's kind of when you start getting into the handcuffs and the second guys in our BBCs. And I think that's fine. That's fine, especially if you are just using a 10th round pick. And if you do have Kamara, that's just an insurance policy just in case something were to happen. I'm going to look up right now Alvin Kamara's game log just to make sure that I'm interested to see how many games he's missed. Yeah, so pretty much last year was the only time when he's missed games. And his second, he played in all 16 his rookie year. He played in 15 out of 16 last year. 2 years ago in 2018. And then in 2019, that's when he had the injury and he missed some time. But other than that, Latavius Murray is just one of the best handcuffs to own. I'm just not sure if I'm comfortable spending that draft pick on him if I don't have Kamara. If you need somebody, to me, Latavius Murray is more so a guy that you can probably get off the waiver wire in week 4 if you need to, and just plug him in for a bye week or two. Now let's talk about the star of this episode, Mr. 99 overall in Madden, and that is Michael Thomas. There are so many words and so many takes that people have about Michael Thomas, and it all depends on who you ask. There are some guys that love him, some guys that hate him. Some guys say that all of his stats are skewed because of the way that the Saints play. But then obviously the other side of the argument is, talent is talent, right? Regardless, in fantasy we don't care about that. In fantasy we only care about stats. And Michael Thomas is an absolute stats monster. 185 targets, leading the NFL. 149 catches, leading the NFL. 1,700 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. Just unbelievable. It was a spectacular year for Michael Thomas. Finished as the number one wide receiver, obviously across the board in all leagues. And adjusted score, you can throw that out the window because that doesn't matter as well. This is really we don't have to spend a whole lot of time here. We really don't. ADP wide receiver 1, going at 105, so just after Alvin Kamara. And just look at those weekly finishes, man. 9 wide receiver 1 finishes, 5 wide receiver 2, didn't even sniff outside the wide receiver 3. Actually, now that I look at the numbers, he had 2 games where he busted. But still, 2 games where he busted. He was, other than that, it was as perfect of a season as you could get for Michael Thomas in a fantasy football perspective. Here's my question. And I thought about doing this before this episode, and I really considered it. Does Michael Thomas repeat as the wide receiver 1 this year? Uh-oh, I have to sneeze. So does he repeat as a wide receiver 1? And I know what you're thinking, right? You're probably thinking, like, what are you talking about? Of course he's going to. But I'm going to bring up a name now that I think has the possibility. I think it's the only person that has the possibility of taking over that crown. And that's Davante Adams. And the only reason why I say this is because let's kind of play this out a little bit more, right? Alvin Kamara caught 81 balls on 14 games, as we just saw. Latavius Murray had 31 catches. We're about to talk about a new player in this offense, Emmanuel Sanders, who finally give the Saints somewhat of a number 2 receiving option. And then they still have Jared Cook as a tight end as well, and we all know how much Drew Brees loves to throw to tight ends. So regression is coming from Michael Thomas. And the question is, how much? I'm going to pull up Michael Thomas's targets right now. Let's see. Michael Thomas. So Michael Thomas's target numbers through the years: 92, 104, 125, 149. I just don't know where this number lands. If I had to take a guess, it's probably going to be around 125, back to where it was 2 years ago, just because you have to give Emmanuel Sanders targets. Alvin Kamara is going to get 2 games more worth of targets, and there are just more mouths to feed in this offense. And yes, this happened all last season where he just had... Wait, what numbers did I read? No, I read that wrong. I apologize. That's on me. I read Michael Thomas's receptions, not his targets. His target numbers have been 121, 149, 147, 185. So to correct myself, I do apologize. I do think it goes down to like that 145 target range. And that's just because Sanders is going to eat in. You're going to get more of Kamara, and I do think that's just kind of how the natural regression is going to go. So where do you take Michael Thomas? And this all comes down to fantasy football philosophy. Of course, I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking about my own philosophies and why I've arrived to such conclusions. This may break some people's hearts. I will not own Michael Thomas in any league this year. I won't do it. I understand the value of what he brings to the table. I mean, we're looking at the numbers right now. You're 9 games as a wide receiver 1. Like, you're getting guaranteed production. But to me, I just value running backs too much to pass one up in the first round. And that's just the way I see it. It's unfortunate that I won't have any shares, but there are so limited running backs and there's a surplus of wide receivers. So that's just my take on drafting a wide receiver in the first round. I'll probably go into expand on that more in a future video. So be sure to subscribe for that. So now let's talk about his new wide receiving core partner, shall we say, numero 2, Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders signed this offseason after spending last season in Denver and then being traded midseason to San Francisco. Emmanuel Sanders used to be a fantasy... is sleeper the right word for this? He was always undervalued. I don't know if that makes him a sleeper, but undervalued is the correct term. Emmanuel Sanders is great. I had Emmanuel Sanders, I believe it was 2 years ago, and that was when he popped off and then he got injured, so RIP me. But regardless, in 2019, finished as a wide receiver 3 in both formats, 32 for standard, 33 for PPR. You're looking at the weekly finishes, and that's where things kind of let you down, right? And there are probably a lot of reasons for this, right? He started off the year in Denver with very bad quarterback play. That doesn't help. And then he gets traded midseason to San Francisco, where Jimmy G is a fine quarterback, but he's not really going to give his wide receivers the ceiling that maybe they could have. Overall, though, he finished with 97 targets, 66 catches, 869 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And then this is where things get ugly for Emmanuel Sanders. When you look at the adjusted score, and yes, that 17 games is correct, because when he got traded, San Francisco already had their bye week, so he played 17 weeks straight, which is kind of insane. But when you look at that, even with that inflated number, his new finish is wide receiver 46. I don't know what Emmanuel Sanders is this year. I'm going to be honest. I have no idea. I have him ranked at wide receiver 44. His ADP is wide receiver 40 going in the 9th round. If you want to bet the upside of Drew Brees being able to support 2 wide receivers, like, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not gonna knock you for it. But let me take a look at who he's going around right now as far as drafting. And while we're doing that, I'm actually going to pull up my rankings as well. So guys that I have in the area of Emmanuel Sanders, so this is going to be both ahead and behind, are Jamison Crowder, Darius Slayton, John Brown, Sterling Shepard, Anthony Miller, Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson, Jerry Jeudy, and basically like the rookies. So to me, he's kind of like in that spot where I don't know how valuable he's going to be. There are some guys there that have a very, very safe floor, and I think he fits that category. But then, would you rather have a rookie with upside instead? I don't know. That kind of depends on team construction. But looking at the ADP right now, where's he going there? We said wide receiver 40. So we're kind of in the same ballpark, right? I'm going to read you some names here. Julian Edelman, Christian Kirk, Darius Slayton, Mecole Hardman. And then you get Emmanuel Sanders. Followed behind him is Mike Williams, Marvin Jones, John Brown, Sterling Shepard. So I'm kind of like, and then you're looking at the run of rookies there, I think, as well, as far as ADP goes. So we're all in the same ballpark with this. Is if you want a super safe, probably a decent size floor, Emmanuel Sanders is the guy for you, but I don't know how many times he's going to win you weeks. If you need a flex play, that feels Emmanuel Sanders territory. Maybe if you play in a 3 wide receiver league, he can slide into your 3rd wide receiver there. But other than that, I don't know how much value you're going to actually get out of Emmanuel Sanders this year. If anything, it helps Drew. It's just one of those things where I think it helps Drew Brees more than it helps Emmanuel Sanders, if that makes sense. And finally, let's cap it off with the tight end, Jared Cook. Jared Cook really came onto the scene 2 years ago as a member of the now Las Vegas Raiders. That's gonna take a while to get used to. Came over to New Orleans, had a great season as a lot of us expected him to, and now let's see what he does. This year. So in 2019, standard tight end 6, PPR tight end 7. Like, this is what we've expected. As I mentioned earlier, Drew Brees loves to throw to his tight ends. And look at that number up top. 9 games as a tight end 1, 2 as a tight end 2, 2 as a tight end 3 as well. And that's unbelievable. And now, granted, that is always a bit skewed in the sense of, there's only a handful of tight ends competing for those spots as a tight end 1 each and every week. But that's why we have context, and that's why I'm going to pull up Jared Cook's weekly finishes, should I say. So we're going to paint some context here, okay? These were all the games that he had. Let's see. We'll go top 6. So for top 6 games, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait, that doesn't even make sense. Wait, what? Hang on a second. We have some 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There we go. Okay, so I was correct. I need to make a change to my sheet here. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, so he had 5 games inside the top 6 at tight end. Like, that's still fine. And then he had some games towards the lower end of being that tight end 1. So you're looking at like 8 to 12. But regardless, like Jared Cook, you're going to start him every week. It's one of those guys where you draft him and you just let him sit in that tight end slot and you don't worry about it pretty much for the rest of the year. Touchdowns is what I am kind of concerned about as far as Jared Cook goes. I don't know how many he gets this year. As I mentioned, and as we've said repeatedly now, Alvin Kamara is expected to be healthy, hopefully for the full season. You then bring in Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas, and how much of this pie is there to go around? I don't know. And you can clearly see that question being asked because of the ADP. This is the guy right now who last year, you're looking at the numbers, finished as just outside the top 5 in his position and is being drafted at tight end 10 in the 8th round. I have him at tight end 8 because I do think that there's going to be some regression, but not enough for it to really matter. But you do see that some people are concerned. As far as tight end goes, let's take a look. With tight ends, I have him at 8. Some guys that I have above him, I think the big 3 that I have above him are Evan Ingram, Tyler Higbee, and Darren Waller. And then right behind him, I have Hayden Hurst, Jonnu Smith, and Austin Hooper. And I think he kind of fits right around that tier where you have guys that could break out this year and that could dethrone him and drop him a bit. But then you have to kind of put him in like this kind of safe area where you do have guys behind him. Like it's kind of like this 2-group thing, right? The tight end position's kind of wild because there are always these pockets of players that could break out this year. So, for example, I think Evan Ingram's one of those guys. Like, I think we finally see it. We've seen pieces of it, but never the full thing. Same thing goes for Tyler Higbee. And so you have those 2. But then behind him with Hayden Hurst, Jonnu Smith, those 2 are kind of the new hotness in the fantasy community. And what we do with those guys and where they ultimately end up, I don't know. So I do like having Jared Cook sandwiched in between those 2 groups. Just kind of have like that safer option. You know what you're going to get if you don't want to take that risk on some of those guys who could boom or bust, honestly. Let's just call that what it is. Adjusted score, we didn't talk about that, but that also hurts Jared Cook as well. 10 points per game for a tight end, like that's totally cool. Fine with that. 14 games, but then the new finish at tight end 11. Like I said, it's tough. It's tough. It's one of the tight end position is so wild because you basically just have this group of 11 to 13 guys just battling it out, and nobody else is necessarily relevant in that way. So it's always it's basically a steel cage match in the position. But I think that's pretty much it. I think we covered everything. As far as the New Orleans Saints go, there's not a whole lot else that I need to say, I don't think. So also, I forgot to say this at the beginning. Text me. Well, this way. There we go. This way. Text me. 330-302-1554. Message and data rates may apply. Basically, if you need any sort of fantasy football advice, whether that's you're in the middle of your draft or you're having a debate with a buddy over what quarterback is going to finish higher this year, or you have a trade offer that you need me to review, or I don't know, you're trying to decide what rookie you want to take in your dynasty startup draft, let me know. Just shoot me a text. I'll be sure to get back to you. I'm going to have so much fun using that platform to really interact with all of you guys. And also follow me on all of my social media at FFVulture. Check out the website, ffvulture.com. Everything's going to be ported over there, and that's going to serve as the main hub for everything that we do. I think this is it, though. Also, be sure to subscribe down below because, once again, hit that subscribe button, power running back style, and also hit the like button like an open receiver down the field. We're going to have another episode up in just a few hours talking about how I create the adjusted ranking, or the adjusted stats, the adjusted rankings, and what that actually means and why I love using it. So I guess that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys in a few hours, and if not, I'll see you guys tomorrow for another All-32 team preview. Later.